So before I put the register back in, I think I'd demonstrate a little bit how the carriers work here. Now it's going to be kind of hard to show because it requires two hands, and I have to hold the camera with one hand because my tripod doesn't go high enough for me to overlook the machine like this. But anyway, these things here are the carry trips, and they interact with these rocking pieces here. You can see that piece rocking there. So normally that piece is held up. I can grab it. It's held up like this against spring tension. And then when you push I can do this here. When the rocker, or when the release for carry hits, should be the one in this column, you can see that whole assembly now, I'm not sure if you can see it or not, the whole assembly now can spring up. I'll just sprung backwards. So I can do this a little bit better here. So you can see that assembly rocking there. Now if I release the carry tab in this column, see, that allows the assembly to spring up like this. And what I believe will happen when that happens is, see how this hook in the front comes down? There's also a hook here in the back, right there, that rises up as the assembly rocks. And I think those will grab onto these pieces here on the digit wheel and rotate it one position forward, I believe. We can double check that once everything's all back together, but I think that's how the carry works. And then so these things will be held out. If I can demonstrate this. So see, as long as these things are sprung up, this will be held out. I don't know if they return automatically or not. I'll check when we put it all back together if something blocks that from happening. But either way, when you pull the handle again, then everything gets reset. You can see the shaft all the way down in the bottom there. I can point to it right down there. Looks like it'll reset those rockers. There's levers that go from that shaft up to each rocker, because that'll pull them back down against their spring tension. Because these things, the backside of these rockers here have these springs on them. Grab one, that are held up to one of the shafts that runs across the top here. So that's what spring loads them into action once the carriage chip gets released. So with that said, you should be able to drop the register back in. See, you've got everything all nice and free now. Like I said before, some of the digits were sticking, so drop that back in. Oops, this is in the way. Everything lined up, that is. There we go. So that's back in now, and you can see it rides in grooves here because this whole register assembly has to go up and down to engage and disengage with the risers here, because I believe on the forward stroke, so on the forward stroke it will be disengaged because these will slide forward, and then on the reverse stroke this will drop down to engage, and as these slide backwards it turns the wheels forward. So the linkage here, which is currently over here under some paper towels. So this is one side linkage, and over here under some other paper towels, I have to clean up this desk, is the other side linkage. So this side is a little bit more complicated because the totaling mechanism is on this side, and some of the pieces from one side are duplicated on the other side. So like this assembly and this assembly, you can see, are present on both sides, but then this side has some extra pieces like this little thing here and this piece here that are engaged with the total mechanism. Other than that, I've got this pretty much all back together. I still have to put the riser assemblies in, but I've got the secondary hammers installed now. So I'm going to leave this alone until I get the rest of the machine assembled, and then I'll put the risers in last. It looks like they're going to be easiest to install with this piece rocked back, but they won't be really held in until this goes forward. So you can see right here are the ends of the risers that attach to the print mechanism. So those ends of those pieces just have a hole that this pin goes into. So from this angle, it'd be pretty easy to just, slide these in and then engage them with that hole. And then once this slides back up, you can see these risers go in between each of those pieces there, and these will be what holds this piece against the riser to keep the pin in the hole. So it's going to be pretty hard to get them in. You have to bend these over to get this past. Without like this, it should be pretty easy to get them in. But like I said, then they'll be liable to fall back out until you put this back up to pretty much lock them in. So I'm going to leave those out for now, and we'll put those back in once everything else is done and this is ready to be locked back up in place. So I'm going to start cleaning up the mechanism for the rest of the levers that go on the side here. We can flip this around and so, for example, this piece has to go up and on there, but I believe there's another piece that goes on there first. So I'm gonna clean all this up and then take a look at how it goes back together. See if we can reassemble everything. I would have liked to take this piece off. It was actually pretty difficult to get the register out without taking this off, because like this shaft is normally something like this. So I had to really bend this piece out to get it off of here, because with the digit wheels frozen onto the shaft, it wouldn't slide. Now that it slides, I can just slide it in, put this up here, and then slide it back over like that, and it should be fine. But to take it off, it was pretty hard because I didn't have the option to slide that shaft over. And I couldn't get, there's one on this side and one on the other side, and they're taper pinned in here. I tried the taper pin on the other side and it wouldn't move at all, so my only option was to like kind of bend this out pretty far to get it off, but I think it'll be okay. It should be easier to reassemble now. Now that I can slide this back and forth to either side. So I'll get working on that and come back with anything interesting. Alright, so these parts are cleaned up. That should be all we need to reassemble the first side, the simpler side. So let's see if we can figure out how this thing goes back together. So first of all, we've got this spacer here that goes on here. Next, I believe, was this piece. I believe it's the only thing that matters which way it goes on. It looks like it originally went on facing that way, just judging by the wear marks. You can see there's a little bit of wear possibly there and not much here where the screw head would be, and then there seems to be more wear on this side and more wear up here where it would be sliding against this piece because it screws on right there. So I'm going to put it on like this. Also going to apply some oil here. That, and apply a little bit to the inside of that. Or be in front of that piece there once we get everything all together. Next, this contraption should go on. So actually, I probably should have cleaned that up first. So let me do that real quick. Just get some thinner here and wipe off that piece. Get that nice and clean. So clean up this down here. That's good. Apply some oil to both of those places. Then this whole thing go on. So we've got this hole goes on that post, this goes on that post, and then this goes on that post, and we should be able to just slide it on right like that. Okay, and now this piece, I believe, should stuck on this. There we go. So that goes on top of that like that. So this goes up here, and this should go. We'll screw in there. Okay, I think we should be in a good place here. So we'll just slide this shaft over to engage with So I lift it up a little bit to get it to engage with this piece. So this is what's going to lift. See how it lifts the whole shaft up and down? So whatever position the default is for this is slightly above the bottom of that trough there. So I had to lift the end up a little bit to get it to slide in. So that's in. So it goes in there. I can slide this over just to keep everything in place. And then this will screw into there. Find the screw for that. Probably should have cleaned that up too. Should I clean that up real quick? It's just this little shouldered screw here. It has a shoulder on it for that piece to pivot on. So we'll just clean that up real quick here. That's a nice clean bearing surface for that piece to slide on. So now should be able to attach this. Maybe. There we go. A little bit of oil on that shoulder before screwing it all the way in. Sure if I got that. This is not the screwdriver. Let's try this one. Is it dust? Alright. So that should be that's good there. It's nice and free, it's nice and free, it's nice and free, and then you have this piece which will hook in the bottom of this spring here, maybe, and hook onto like that. Which I'll go over and apply a liberal coating of oil to all the stuff again, but that's that. And then this piece here, the last piece is this piece. Let's see. Show exactly where this goes. Probably actually might go on. Probably goes in there, maybe. Yeah, there's a shaft that's tapped in there, so that's probably where that goes. So actually, let me. Yep, probably goes on that shaft. So let me clean that shaft up. Just to make a nice clean surface for that. I'll push that shaft back in. I'll slide this out a little bit so that can go down in there. Something like that. I believe this goes up on top of there. And let's see, where are we? So I have to go down underneath like that. And it doesn't look right either. So I have to play with that a little bit. I'm pretty sure this piece goes here, but I'm not quite sure where exactly this other end goes. So the shaft is right there that it should pivot on. If we can push this up again. close we are. Pretty close. See if that shaft will go through now. It doesn't look like it wants to. So I'm going to have to play with this for a little bit and see if I can figure out how exactly that goes back in. It's pretty close though. So what are we hitting on? We're hitting on that piece, I think. I don't think it goes in front of it. So I'm going to play with that for a little bit. This is what I ended up with for the other side, which is pretty similar except that it has this extra piece here and this extra piece here. And this piece, which I was trying to figure out how it went back on the other side, has this extra little piece up here with a pin that interacts with another lever on the back side here. So I was right actually that this went on here. I just had to put the piece that sticks out here behind this piece. And you can see there's a little, there's a little round piece that this bears on the back of that, so that when this comes back, it lifts up that. So yeah, I just had to get it behind there because I was having an issue where the front of that piece was hitting against this piece, but I had to go behind it. So once I did that, then it went right in and it's fine. I have played around with this a little bit. Adding seems to work as far as I can tell. Without the keyboarding, you can't really tell, if it's accurate. But looking at least the first column without the keyboarding, I can see it adding 9 every time. So that seems to be okay. Totaling and clearing out doesn't seem to clear every digit, but again, that's because there's probably because there's still a bunch of pieces missing here. So hopefully, once everything is back together and we tested, everything will work fine. If not, we'll be taking it back apart again to figure it out. But I think this is fine. Like I said, there's still a bunch of pieces missing, some interlocks and stuff that go in the back here, and the springs that interact with the carry mechanism are not in place. Those springs hook onto this shaft just to run through the top there, through this hole. So hopefully once you get that back in, and also these pieces, which are the wheel detents that go on the top here, and kind of detent each position. Those are also missing too, which could play a factor. So yeah, so it's kind of interesting to look at these things. There's always a bunch of seemingly random levers going all over the place, but once you actually look at how it works, like this is a stop for this, so the register doesn't fall back down. So right now the register is disengaged when it's sitting on this stop. When you actuate the machine, this comes forward and pulls this off, so we can actually show that. So I have to hold this up actually. So right now the levers are moving forward that way up to where they would be stopped by the keyboard if the keyboard was in place. Now at the end of the stroke, see how that started to move? Now the register drops in, it's engaged. So now on the return stroke, we're driving all the digits. Now see how it lifted it back up again? So it lifted this back up so it could go back on that perch, and then this pushes it over at the end of the travel. Or something does. It may not actually be this. But something somewhere in here, probably maybe that piece. I have to look at that, but I'm actually not sure what lifts that up either. Might be this. Let's see, does that move? You can see this piece comes back up. I have to look at what exactly that's riding on to lift that back up, but it'd be that? No, I don't think so. Not sure, but anyway. See, that lifts back up, and then that lifts it back up on the stop that disengages the register again. This piece, I'm not actually sure what this is yet. I think it interacts with this, which goes up here somewhere. there's another shaft that goes through here that locks the print mechanism in. So once that goes in, this will go back on. So that's probably what this piece interacts with, because there's a pin on the back side there that probably either goes here or in there or somewhere around there to interact with that. This piece here is part of the throttling mechanism, so when you push the throttle key down, this comes forward and engages a stop to stop all the wheels at 0. That's what that's for, and also engages with this, which I'm not sure what exactly that does. So look into that too, but yeah, making some progress here. Next thing I'm probably going to do is reinstall the 2 shafts that go up here, one for the detents for the wheels, and the other for the springs for those carry trips. So we'll probably install those next, and then we can probably finalize the installation of the print mechanism, hopefully. And after that, we can just clean up the keyboard and install that, and we should be pretty good to go. Alright, so as you can see, I've got the print mechanism completely reassembled and back into the machine. Alright, I had a couple issues that I'll go into in a little bit, but I've cleaned up all the printers. I'm going to run some oil down in between them too, just so they can slide nice and easy against each other. Also back in, this plate goes back on to hold them in place. What I did was, well, first of all, let's go into some of the issues that I had putting this back in. So the first issue was I did not put the non-print plate, which is actually all the way down in the bottom here. I'm not sure if you can see it. Maybe you can see a little bit. See that plate that's moving? That's a plate with the comb on the end that when you push the non-print key, which is this, which I think I have to realign because it's kind of dragging a little bit. We'll look into that then. Anyway, when you push this, that pushes that plate forward and blocks any of the hammer release risers, these skinny pieces here, from coming up so that nothing prints. That pivots on a shaft, which is my pointing device. This shaft right here. Get a better view so you can see. Yeah, this shaft right here. So that that piece comes up and has a pivot here and a pivot on the other side. I probably should have put that in before I put any of these pieces in. It was really difficult to get in there. I ended up having to take this out. It was actually a lot easier than I thought it would be. It just basically has a C on one end that hooks on one of the shafts. So if you lift it up off that shaft, you can just slide it right out. So they get that out, and then even with that out, it was so difficult to wiggle that in there and get everything lined up. And then hooking the springs on that shaft, because the springs that pull these up also hook onto that shaft. Trying to hook those on, in behind there with all the stuff in the way. Well, I mean, these weren't in the way, but these risers were in the way, so you couldn't like reach in the front. That was also rather difficult. So I probably should have put that in and put the springs on before I hooked the risers into the plate up here. Probably would have been the easiest way, but anyway, we did get it in, and it does pivot in, so it should be fine. Another issue that I had was the hammers were not fully resetting, so I believe I kind of explained. It's going to be kind of hard to see now, which is why I explained it earlier, but down in there is this plate with the bend on the end that locks the hammers back. That's what lifts up to release them. That was not fully returning, and the reason was because the hammers weren't fully returning, so that plate was not going down because it was hitting on the very end tips of the hammers because they weren't returning all the way. And what I did to rectify that was this lever here is the actuator for the print mechanism, so that's the main driver that comes in and pulls down on this lever to actuate it, and then it pushes back up to return the hammers on the return stroke. So what I ended up doing was I just bent this bracket a little tiny bit so that this peg that comes out was somewhat angled down just a little bit more, and that made it so that when this rod was all the way in this home position, it pushed the bracket up far enough to force the hammers all the way home. So that could have been bent any number of ways, when I was trying to get the thing apart, or when I was trying to get table pins out, or anything, you want to just give it a little tiny bend that was enough to misalign it, and then it wasn't, there wasn't enough upward motion to return the hammers all the way home. So I just give it a little tiny bend. I don't even know if you can really see that it's bent, but I just give a little teeny tiny bend, and that was enough to give it enough upward travel to return the hammers home. So that part's fixed. The third problem that I had was that the register did not want to drop in all the time. So let's see if we can flip this around. I just dropped it on top of the punch. So as you recall, the register drops down to engage with the teeth on the sliders. And what I found was happening was a couple of the wheels here were misaligned with the teeth on the sliders, and so the teeth were hitting and not meshing, and I was preventing the register from dropping all the way down. And I think I showed before when I was testing this before this was all assembled here, that it was dropping down and was adding. So something happened in the assembly process to change that. And what I found out was this piece, which I had forgotten to link up to a lever on the side, was the new addition. And what was happening was, this is the stop piece. So when nothing's entered on the keyboard, these are all in line with the ends of the risers, and so they only come out and stop against here and don't add anything. And then when something's entered on the keyboard, these are lifted up to allow these to slide forward to whatever key stop was pressed. So what I found was somehow these had gotten misadjusted or something, and these risers were either sliding too far forward or not far enough forward to mesh properly with the teeth on the gears when the register dropped. So what I ended up doing there was just kind of tweaking these tabs a little bit. You can see the tabs right here that the pins come out and stop against. Just kind of tweak those a little bit until everything dropped down nice and smooth. And so now, you'll see if I pull the handle, so the register drops down in, and then disengages on the return stroke when it's back at home. So theoretically, if we lift this up, that would be the equivalent of adding 9, because when you enter a 9, there's no keyboard stop, the slider just goes all the way forward. So releasing this with no stop should add a 9. And it does, we got 0, 9. We can try it again, we should get 18. So that works, and carry works. So now if I add 9 in this column, I should get a 0 and carry over. That works. So obviously this is not going to be a full test to look with the keyboard back in, but so far it looks promising. Now I do a blank crank, and if I do a total, I did bend this bracket a little bit. I think what happened was because the total key was so bent in shipping, it had messed up this bracket, especially when I tried to bend it back, then it was all messed up in here. As you can see, it's got a bracket here with a screw in between, so I have to slide up and down on that, and that was all bent out of shape. So I tweaked it a little bit, and I'm probably going to tweak it a little bit more. You can see the key still kind of bent over. But this seems a lot freer now. It doesn't bind anymore. And the keyboard clear also releases the total key. And you can see it reliably releases every time. So I think that's what was causing the total to not work properly, was that key was getting stuck because it was bent. So that seems fine now. So if I push this down, the register clears out just fine. So far we're looking pretty good. I have to reseat a couple taper pins here and here, and here. This one's still pretty far out. I have to reseat those. I'm probably going to readjust this bracket a little bit just so this piece is pretty loose. I have to see what I can do about that. So this is the non-print key, and this is the non-add key. And all the non-add key does is basically it has, over to the side here, it has two little hooks. That's the wrong key. This is the key. So you can see when I push that down, this shaft rotates, and these hooks come forward. There's one on each side. And basically all that they do is they hook around the register shaft and prevent the register from dropping down to engage. So that's all that does. And the reason why they're spring-loaded here so they don't latch down, is because the keys themselves, which are these guys, which have to go on once the case goes on, they just push on the top of these little nubs. They have a cutout in them that will latch into the case. So you'd push the key down and the key would latch back against the case, and you can just kind of pull it forward to release. The same way that the repeat key will work. See how the repeat key is, it latches forward and then you pull it back to release. Basically that's the same way either of those will work. So you can do multiple calculations for non-put and multiple calculations for non-add if you want. I'm going to do some more cleaning down in this area before reinstalling the keyboard. Going to do some cleaning on the keyboard. Probably going to maybe oil this up a little bit. I didn't oil this yet. Do some cleaning on this release mechanism here. But so far so good. We can flip it back around and watch some of the printing. Usually these machines get lighter as you disassemble them and heavier as you put them back together, but this machine is just always heavy. This is a solid piece of cast iron. This is a solid piece of cast iron here for the base, so just like the Burroughs Class 3, no matter how many pieces you take off the machine, it's still heavy because of this. So we can add 9 here, and this should rise up and print 9. And I'm not sure if you were able to see it because it's so fast, but the 9 did print. You can do that again. Now we can do a total, and then, oops, I have to print first. And then total, and then this one should print, and I should print 18. And of course, they all spring up as they release. So basically, the way that totaling works is it will allow the risers to come forward, but engage a stop, which we can actually see if I flip this back around again. So you can kind of see all the way back. Let's see. See that little tab all the way in the back there? There's a little piece of square metal there, right there. That is the totaling stop. Those are all on a piece of steel, and when you total, not sure if we can see. Yeah, there you can see. See where they come forward? And those will stop against these levers. Where am I pointing? Here. These levers. They have a little lever here that will stop on that tab. So basically, it releases, you can see it's released all of the keyboard risers, so these levers, the adding levers, can come as far forward as they want to, but they will only come as far forward as the wheels let them until they're stopped by that little tab back there. And then the register will disengage, and when that happens, because once it all gets to 0, you want to disengage from the risers, because when the risers return, you don't want to add the number back in. So it'll let the risers come forward until they're stopped by the wheels, and then it will disengage the wheels to keep the wheels at 0. And when it disengages, then the risers, of course, spring all the way forward, and that's that springing that you saw in the total part in the print heads. So that's common to every machine that I can think of that is the add listing machine. Burroughs did that, Sunstream does that, they all do that. Can't think of anyone that doesn't. That's not to say there aren't any that doesn't, but I just can't think of any. So anyway, that's what that was. That's just the register disengaging and then the lever springing all the way forward to keep the register at 0 without adding the number back in. Now, if this machine had a subtotal function, it would leave the register engaged all the time during the totaling mechanism so that the number would be added back in on the return stroke. But since this only has total leaves it at 0, so that's the disengaged that. So yeah, so far so good. I'm going to do some more cleaning down in here, some more cleaning on these mechanisms, but definitely looking pretty good now. So we'll come back when there's something interesting. Alright, so I ended up taking the key plate off the keyboard, and you can see why. This thing is so dirty. there's no way I was going to be able to properly clean it with the keycaps and the key stems in there. So I tried there running like a paper towel through, and it's just wasn't going to work very well. So I took this off. Luckily, the keycaps came off very easily. I didn't have to pry any of them. They all just pretty much pulled right off by hand, which is surprising and unusual. And this plate is actually a piece of brass. You can see it's a solid piece of brass, so that's kind of surprising. Usually the key plates like that are just steel. Interesting. Anyway, so yeah, surprisingly all the keycaps pulled off real easy. I got all those off, and there's 4 screws, and the plate just lifts right off. And luckily these key stems seem like they're going to stabilize pretty well. You see there's a little bit of side-to-side play and a little bit of, I mean, you can actually pull these out like I pulled these out, but the springs, because they're on top, keep these pretty well aligned. Like on the Monroe keyboards, they have the springs there. These key stems kind of just flop all over the place. But these ones are, they move. You can move them pretty easy, but generally they'll stay where you put them. Unlike the Monroes where they just, lean, side to side all over the place. So hopefully they won't be too hard to get everything lined up to put the key plate back on. And I'm glad that I took this apart, because you can see the difference here between the ones that I have cleaned and the ones that I haven't cleaned. So definitely glad that I did take that apart and gave me an opportunity to clean out inside here. So I think I described how this works before. Basically what you've got is, we can show here, the key stem, you can see has attached to a lever down here, which pivots here, and then has another pivot here up to this other lever. So when you push the key down, it pushes up a little pin back here, and then that is what the riser will come forward and stop again. So like right now, 1's up because this is, this key is down. This would have to be, actually it's latched down. So the latches are back here. And you can see if I release the latch here, it'll allow me to pull that back up. And then when I push the key down, it latches there, and that's your key latch. So it's kind of interesting actually. The springs are up here, and then they would be pulling on this lever, which is pulling down on that against the latch. So definitely a different keyboard arrangement. Not too bad to clean. Cleaning the top pieces, I'm going to have to use a Q-tip or something to get down inside, and you can see down inside there are all the pivots for each row. So at least you can get down with a Q-tip or something in there and clean the dirt off each of these, oil everything, and put it back together. The most annoying part is getting these pegs here lined back up. So you can see like that one's dropped down, a couple over here have dropped down, so you kind of have to put your finger in there and kind of wiggle them until they line up with the hole, and then you basically slide the key stem back in its slot here. And then if you look at the sides of the key stems, if you can see, there are 2 little detents here. So those are what stop the key. So when you push it down, it hits against this one, and then the spring pulls it up against this one when it's released. So basically you just, we can slide it in like that. The spring is stuck there. So we'll slide in like that, and now it's locked down. So if I release this, you see the spring pulls it back up. You're not even seeing. There we go. Oh, no, they're latched. Because not all the pegs are lined up, the latch sometimes gets jammed against misaligned pegs, so that's why it doesn't always latch right now. But that's basically it. You just push the key down, and then transfers the movement all through that lever mechanism up to there, and then it latches in the back there. So you're not, yep, they're latched. So yeah. Just going to continue cleaning on this. and we'll put it back together. I'm cleaning and oiling in here. I still have to clean up this chain yet, but I put some fresh lithium grease on that. That's the detent catch, so basically when you pull the handle back, it makes sure that the handle doesn't go forward if you let it go until you've reached all the way in the back. And then same thing when you go forward, to make sure that you can't pull the handle back again until the handle's moved all the way forward. So I put some grease on that instead of oil because, you know, most of the time this is exposed. So, you know, usually you want oil on places that are in constant contact, but like grease is usually better for places that are not. Sometimes I'll use oil on places that are not constant contact, but anyway, I decided to use grease there, so that's done. Cleaned up this mechanism. This is the clearing thing here. You can see when this gets pushed forward, which it will be by this little this little rounded knob here. This will go back and latch behind this little tab, and on the forward stroke it'll push that forward and release the keyboard. You can see it actuates the same mechanism. You can't see. This actuates the same mechanism. Let's see. There we go. This actuates the same mechanism that the clear key does. So basically, it just pulls the clear key down. Essentially, same mechanism. And the repeat. You can see if I latch repeat down, it basically just holds this up so that the little nub doesn't catch and release the keyboard. That's pretty simple. Interestingly enough, when you push the total key down, you can see it latches this down, and this basically adds an extra spring on the total stroke. So if I clear total, and this would just be a regular stroke now, you can see that this mechanism does nothing. You see I'm going all the way down, and then on my return stroke, you watch that nub pushes that and would clear the keyboard. Now on total, that comes down, and now when I pull it, you can see that nub now catches on this piece, which is now pulling on this spring. See, that spring's getting pulled now. So for some reason, on the total stroke, they thought it was necessary to have this additional spring to work against. Really not sure why. It's kind of interesting, but yeah, it's kind of weird. But that's what that is. So this over here is the directional ratchet. So anything else? Yeah, we can talk about this piece back here. I have something to point with. Right here, this funny shaped thing, that is what actuates the releases for the risers. So we can get this all in shot. So that santh metal piece there with the funny shape cut out, and it actually goes up and is attached to here, attached to this shaft that goes all the way across, which has little fingers that go down that the risers stop against. So you see as I pull this forward, that would pull the risers forward. We can get a top view. So you can see that you can hold one of these up. There, got it latched. You can see down in there, the riser riding against that little roller there, and now as a return stroke, it pushes the riser back. So that's what that does. That's the release for the riser, slider, whatever you want to call it, the piece that comes forward that will stop against the keyboard pegs to enter the correct digit. It's the same piece that has the teeth on it that drives the wheels. So that's just the release and then return for those. Clear this out. I just have to fix this. Still has a little bend in it. I have to fix that yet. But otherwise, yeah, I have to clean this up. And then I think we're ready to put the keyboard back in and do some testing. Actually, probably before we do that, I may clean up the patent just to test printing at the same time. And of course the keyboard won't stay in because I still have to glue the feet on the bottom. And when I flip this over, I put a board right here to support the front of it, because the back, actually the back, I might have to put a board there now too, because before I was resting it on this frame, but you can see now I've got my levers here, so I might have to do something else there too. We'll see. Anyway, definitely the keyboard will have to come back out later to support the front of the machine when I flip back over to glue the feet on. But luckily the keyboard's very easy to remove, it's just the 2 pins that go in, so it's not a big deal there. So, continue cleaning, and so I'll have to put the keyboard back together yet, and I'll put that back in and do some testing. Alright, so I'll turn my head to the carriage. Unfortunately this won't all fit in the frame, this is as high as my tripod goes, but this is the rail here for sliding the carriage different positions. And if you remember, this was completely frozen when I first took a look at this. When I tried to take this whole assembly off, I was hard to get at some of the screws, which are actually go in this side, because the carriage assembly was all up in here, and I couldn't move it to get better access to those. But as you can see, it moves now, and actually it goes on this way. Remember I mentioned before about this braze repair. I don't think they ever finished this repair correctly, because the way that they had this set up, I can't really see how this would have ever worked at all. So you can see that we've got these little V grooves here. So this is a V groove, and the other part also has a V groove. So this is a V, this side has a V on both sides, and then there's a V in here and a V down there. And it has these little cylinders. See if I can find one real quickly here. Here's one. These little cylinders that go in there. Now, the way that they had it, they had the cylinders in like that. And then, of course, the other V would slide over top. The issue is, it doesn't seem to work. So, you can see that we have this little cage here. Now this has a cutout, like folded over inside the rail here. One there, you can just barely see the edge of the cylinder inside that cutout, and then one here. So when putting the cylinders in like this, I got one in here, in this side. I managed to get one in here, it was pretty tight, but then I could not get the last one inside this cage. You know, of course, with this slid all the way over with the cage off the end, so you can kind of pop it up inside there. So I came to the conclusion that that was not correct. Well, there's something else I wanted to mention. So they had the cylinders like that, except for one, which was like this. Now, as soon as I took the one that was like this out, it seemed to loosen out. So I had assumed that the reason it was jammed initially was because this one was like that, in the wrong way, and that they were all supposed to be in like that. However, I came to the conclusion that they're all supposed to be in like this, and that this is the incorrect way. Because right now I have all the cylinders in, well, obviously not all of them. I have 3 in, there's 6 total there. I have 3 in each of these places. So one here, one here, one here. And as you can see, it moves nice and free. So that was one issue, that they had all of these in the wrong way. Now I do have, there's 6 cylinders in total. I think you're actually supposed to have 2 in each cage, because you can see how the cylinder there's a lot of empty space there, so I think I can fit another cylinder inside each of the cages. They had them all spread out, so they had just had they had 3 spread out across the bottom and then 3 spread out across the top. I didn't pay attention to whether or not any were in this cage or not. They must have, because nothing else holds this cage on. So that's the first issue. They had all these cylinders in wrong and didn't have all of them in the cage like they're supposed to be. The second issue was, once I figured out how this goes together, there were some tight spots where the carriage would slide and then stick, and then instead of the cylinders rolling, they would just stall out and the carriage would slide under them. And I traced that down to improper finishing on the braze joints. So you can see one of the braze joints here, how it comes into the inner groove, if it would focus anyway. I did quite a bit of filing on this to get this to where the carriage would slide past it. There was quite a big bump out there of braze material. You can see there I filed almost all the way down through the piece right there, right to where the original cast iron is. So I did quite a bit of filing on that to get the carriage to slide past it. And you can see that that repair goes all the way down to the back, so filing in here shouldn't really weaken it at all. I also did do some filing on this side. They didn't get these lined up quite perfect, so there was a bit of a bump in between these two pieces, so I did some filing there too just to smooth that out. And then there was another issue on the bottom here. You can see just the bottom side of the crack. That also was not quite even, so I did some filing on there to get it to slide past. So now it slides nice and free end to end. Of course you can't really see the whole thing and it's not going to fit in frame, but then the third issue was the end stops. So the carriage has, or the sliding piece has two holes, and has a hole here, we just need to put a stud in there, and it has a hole here, which you can see has the original stud. So this is the only remaining stop that was originally in there. I've also added one here and one here. These are the two stops. So basically how this works is when you slide the carriage all the way over, the stop in here hits on this side of the roller, and then the roller hits against the bottom of this screw here, and that's your stop, so you can't pull it out. If you take the screw out, then you can just slide the whole carriage right out. So yeah, so there were three total issues with this. They had the rollers in wrong, they had improper finishing on the braze repairs, the carriage would have slide past those repairs, and they were missing all the end stops. So that leads me to believe that this carriage never worked properly after they did the braze repair. I really don't know why they would go through the trouble to braze this and then not finish it properly so that it would slide, but that's the only conclusion I can come to, is that this never worked properly after the braze repair. Unless, you know, maybe they could just like shoved it where they wanted, but it was really, really stiff once I had two of the rollers in the wrong way, and then I couldn't even get the third one in, it wouldn't go in. So, yeah, not sure what the deal is there. Either way, this is sliding free now. Like I said, I'm going to see if I can put one more roller in each of these places to use up the other rollers. I think that's how it's supposed to be. And then we'll get to putting the rest of the assembly together. I've done some cleaning and oiling on this, so that should be ready to go back in. Once I get this all assembled, I'll go through how it works. It is missing some pieces. We'll get into that. On another thing, all of these holes have a different screw, and you can't really mix them up. The screw that goes in this hole won't fit in this hole, and the one from this hole won't fit in this hole, so that's also not correct. But we have all the screws we have a screw that'll fit each hole, so we'll just go with that. Although the one in this hole is kind of stiff, so I'm going to see if I can sand the head of the screw down a little bit so it fits a little bit better in there. But yeah, that's another area that seems to be somewhat messed up. So yeah, anyway, I just find it bizarre that they would go through the repair to do all this braze work and then not take the time to file it to make it fit, and then assemble it properly. Seems kind of weird to me, but anyway, that should be fixed now, so we'll go ahead with putting it back together. Alright, so as you can see, I've got the carriage back on and almost completely assembled. I straightened out these. I need to do a little bit more on this one, but this one's pretty good. This one's angled up a little bit yet. I have to maybe adjust that a little bit. They slide decently. Look at stuck. They hit against here, so this is the end stop. So these things kind of control where these can go. I did clean these shafts up a little bit and oiled them. It may just be that these are, like the whole thing, this shaft kind of bends a little bit too, so it may just be that these are kind of being pushed at an odd angle, but they do move, not terrible. I did sand most of these shafts somewhat. Obviously they're not going to be perfect. You can see where the plating has come off and sort of the rust in those spaces. So I didn't get these perfect, just cleaned them up. Everything should work fine. I'll just clean them up somewhat and put a light coating of oil on some of these, like up here, put a light coating of oil for these to slide on, their tension down there. I did put the other rollers back in the carriage slide, and you can see it's not perfect, but it is better. I think it might be rubbing a little bit on the pattern or something. It is somewhat loose, so the rails there are somewhat loose. Alright, so they came out of memory there, but what I was saying was the carriage does slide. It's not going to be perfect. But I think it'll be good enough. So the next thing is, I go over a little bit about how this works. But also I can put in this piece right here, which is the carriage lock. So, oops, there's a cutout for it to go in, slide into the side here. And you can see how this is going to work. It's going to line up, these grooves are going to line up with that hole. Push this all the way over here. It's going to line up with another hole on that side. Then you have to release the spring tension on this. Get it to slide past. That's going to spring tension it. And then there's this knob that just screws onto the end here. And now this should lock in. Yep, and then to release it, you just push this. And then it should just lock in there. Slide it back to the middle and then have it lock in. And there we go. Okay, so to go over how this works, you can see this piece down here comes out of the machine. So in the home position when the crank is at rest, this piece is all the way out. And then when you pull the crank, this piece retracts in and allows this piece here, which is spring-loaded against it, you can see it's spring-loaded there, allows that to come forward. And when this whole thing rocks forward, this arm comes down. And when that arm comes down, which is attached to this piece here, which goes up and then all the way around to the front right here, that's the ratchet for the carriage. So watch as I pull the handle, so that retracts as that piece rocks forward. And then when it returns, you can see it drives the pattern forward. So that is the paper advance. It's controlled by that. And like I said, this is the release for that there. You can see this piece here is spring-loaded. That's spring-loaded very tightly against detents here, and that's your pattern detent, so the pattern doesn't just spin freely. You've got this lever here, and you can see what that does. That rocks this shaft, and then there's 3 rollers, one here, here, and here, that are spring-loaded up against the pattern. So that's basically your paper release. You know, if you put the paper in sideways, you can push this. That'll release the tension pushing the paper against the pattern, and then you can, you know, straighten it out. So that's that. We also have over here on this side, this is the line feed adjust. So right now I have it on, I think it's single spacing right now, but you can pull this out and rotate it down. Now that would be no spacing. I believe that's like if you have a big sheet of paper in here and you want to go across the page, you don't want the paper to advance every time. You want it to stay in line so you can move the carriage over to your next position on the page. That'd be 0 line feed, and you've got 1 line feed, and then you've got 2 line feed. And all that does is, you can see this stop here. It just controls how far forward this is allowed to rock. So like in this position, you can see this hardly moves at all, so this doesn't move far enough to catch any teeth on that ratchet for the pattern, so it doesn't advance. And then like in this position, it just moves far enough to catch one tooth, and then in this position it moves far enough to catch two teeth. So that's your paper advance control there. Now I was putting it back together, I was rather confused by this mechanism, which doesn't really seem to do anything. You see, when I pull the handle, this piece rocks. See, this piece comes back and forward, but it doesn't seem to accomplish anything. And the more I looked at this, I realized that there's a peg here that doesn't seem to have any effect, and there's a screw hole here which also doesn't seem to have any effect, and then there's this thing here which I don't have anything to go in. So I looked at some pictures, and what we are missing here is the line count. Just like the Burroughs Class 1, this would have a big dial here with a bell on it that would increment every time you pull the handle. This piece here is a ratchet for that. It will drive it forward to count the number of lines that you processed. And then I assume, like at some point, I don't know if you can adjust it, or just when it gets to the maximum count, it'll ring the bell. The Burroughs Class 1 that I have also has something like that. So we're missing that. I have no idea what happened to it. But that's what these pieces are here are left over for. Those are the ratchets for advancing that mechanism. So, yeah, not a big deal. Just a minor feature. But so anyway, I think that's about all we have to say for the carriage. It's pretty simple, really. Not too complicated. Like I said, I'm gonna have to straighten this. I thought I had fixed these, but apparently this one. So it's a little bit bent, so I'll adjust that. And then I think we are ready to test this out pretty much. Yeah, so just put this plate back on temporarily. So, got the keyboard here. See if we can pop this in. Do this without getting in the way of the camera, probably not. Let's see where the hole is. There's one. See if this will. So I have to on this side so I can see what I'm doing. On the camera here. Not really. So you just have to line up there's one. Right, so that shaft is started on that side, so we can get this side lined up here. There you go. I think I'm stuck on something. Not quite sure exactly what though. Let's see if I can turn this phone. See if that frees anything up there maybe. Not. It's pretty easy to take out. I'm not sure what it's getting stuck on. Going back in. I don't really see anything. I'll be holding this up. So now I got that shaft in. So this key was, I just pushed the repeat key down and that allowed that first shaft to go in. So let's see. The bottom one is really out though. Not sure. I'm gonna have to play with this one because I'm not quite sure what I'm hitting on here to get the bottom to go down. That's hitting on something. This needs to go down a lot more. Not sure what it's hitting on. Okay, so the problem was the clearing mechanism. So if you remember, we had showed before how, how when you push the key, the clear key, see it locks that shaft, and then if you can see down there, those little rollers push against the release latches for the keyboard. So what's happening was I had those little tabs on the release latches underneath those wheels, and so that's why the keyboard wouldn't lock up, because those wheels were holding all those release tabs down. And you know, the way that the wheels are, the wheels are supposed to push up against the release tabs, not the release tabs pushing up against the wheels, so it wouldn't slide past those wheels. So what I did was I just took this shaft back out, and then I kind of slid this in, so like at an angle the other way, so that the release tabs slid up on top of those wheels, and then both shafts slid in pretty easily. So keyboard's in. I have not cleaned up the keycaps yet. I'm going to save that for last once everything is in. Because like I said, I still have to take this back out again to flip this upside down to put the feet on. But we can do some little testing here. So let's try 1, 2, 3. And it adds that in. We can do 4, 5, 6. There's a few of those that have repeat on, so we'll take repeat off. 7, 8, 9. And now keyboard clears 9, 8, 7. 6, 5, 4. That's wrong. 6, 5, 4. And 3, 2, 1. And 3, 3, 0, that is correct. So addition seems to work. I'll do an empty crank. And then total. And it clears out, so that's good. Printing is faint. I think the ribbon must be on a bad part or something, a dry part. See if I can just spin this ribbon a little bit, see if we can get to a somewhat wetter part. Let's see if it'll print here. No, not really. Alright, so I thought that ribbon was going to work, but because it was printing at one point earlier, but it seems like it's actually not going to, so I have to look into something else for that. Anyway, let's see if all the carries work. So enter all 9s. And enter a 1. And it carried all the way across, got off the end of the machine, and we got all 0s. So those all seem to work. I can take a look here at what the carries do. So I'll enter a few 9s, and let's see if we can see it. Yes, so maybe. There you go. So see those shafts right down in there, in that crack? Watch those when I add a 1. Maybe that was the wrong thing to watch. Those didn't do anything. Those, you know, those are part of the, yeah, I can see now what it is. We can see, okay, there. See those little tabs there? Notice how the ones here, so see, tab there, tab there, tab there, tab there. See how those are all tripped, and the ones over here are not? They're forward underneath this bar. While those ones there have tripped, those are your carry tabs. And like I described before, those spring forward, and unlike, well, yeah, I think what they do, I think I tried this before, I think what they do is they trip, and then there's a little hook that pushes the next wheel forward one position. So, did this work correctly? Why do I have an 8 here? If I entered all 9, I should have a 0 there. Let's clear this out and try that again. So if I enter all 9s here, enter a 1 here, carries all the way over. I don't know how I got an 8 there. I'm not sure what happened, unless I entered to the wrong position. I don't know. Not quite sure what happened there. Somehow I had an 8 in this position. Didn't notice that at first. But anyway, tried it again and it seems to work. We can try it once more just to make sure it's going to be reliable. And it seems to be reliable, so it won't happen that time. Take a look at our paper here, which I guess that's going to need a new ribbon. But hopefully once we have the new ribbon, it should work. You can see it's trying to print, but you can see all the 9s there. Yeah, it's definitely going to need a new ribbon. I'm just looking to see if that one where it went to 8 is printed, but I don't really see it. Not quite sure what happened with that. Like I said, since I've been playing here, it seems to work. So I don't know how I got an 8 there that one time. Just I've been paying attention to something. Okay, so I'm pretty satisfied with that. Like I said, all the carriages work. We can enter, a number, make sure that all the positions are clear on their own. So I'll enter all the way across, and then if I total that, it should clear just fine, and it does. Same thing if I go this way. Yep, seems to be working fine, so, okay. Next up for this, I guess, is the feet. And unfortunately, they're still drying, so I can't put them on right now. But, yeah, so far so good. I still have to clean up the case, too. That's still got that green rubber stuff on, so I'll also work on that. But, yeah, we can make sure that the clear works. Yep. We've already tested that repeat works. That was working in the beginning when we had it latched down accidentally. So that seems fine. Clear seems fine. Total seems fine. Printing seems to be working. Looks like we might gotten to a somewhat better part of the ribbon. Is that last position printing? I'm not sure if that last position is printing. Let me take a look into that. Either the ribbon is just really faint there. See, let's enter this number again. I can't really tell if that last position is printing. Maybe I can look at it from the side. Yeah, the hammers are going forward, so it must be. It must be just that the ribbon's too faint there, I guess. It looks like it's getting hit with the hammer, so it must be printing. I guess the ribbon is just too faint, but enter a 9 here. Yeah, it's definitely hitting it, so it just must be the ribbon not registering for some reason. Anyway, I should put all zeros too. Yeah, it does put all zeros. Like I said, it's just faint, but yeah, so as you can see all the way in the back there. I think the ribbon is just too faint. See, this is where I entered 9 and all zeros, so it is printing all the zeros, just the 9's not showing up. I guess it's, we'll have to try it once we get the new ribbon on, but I can see the hammer hitting it, so it must be printing, but anyway, let's clear this out. And yeah, so next step is case cleaning and feet. Something else I wanted to mention, I thought that this had auto reverse. You can see this peg right here is the ribbon direction change, so if I push that over, that's going to wind it on this wheel. If I push it this way, it's going to wind it on the other wheel. And when I first saw that, I thought that the ribbon was supposed to come off and go around that, so that way when the ribbon got tight, it would automatically pull it, or vice versa. So like when this wheel got tight, it would pull it that way to start winding on this wheel. But this is the position the wheels sit in, and you can see that the very end of this shaft is just right up against the bottom of the wheel there. So there's nowhere that the ribbon could ever go around that shaft. You'd just be catching the very tip of it. It's just going to pull right off. And these are in the right position because you can see the ribbon is, you know, in its guides right in front of the punches there. So I'm not quite sure what the deal is with that. Like it really looks like it should be auto reverse, but just not seeing how it would work auto reverse. As I said, there's no way the ribbon can get around that. But yeah, anyway, just something else I wanted to point out. See, this machine is starting to look really oversized again at a top view. You know, when it's all apart, it doesn't look that big. Once everything's all together, it starts to look like quite a large machine. So yeah, something else I wanted to point out. Alright, so as you can see, we are upside down again, and that's because we're dealing with the feet, hopefully for the last time. So my initial plan was to mold these feet. Actually, let me show you what I was going to do. So I had taken some plastic cups like this and filled them partially with the rubberized caulk, and I was going to then, you know, cut the lumpy parts off the top and then attach those as the feet. You can see kind of this is what I had started out with. So obviously, like, you'd cut it, you know, maybe right around here or so, get rid of this lumpy part, and then just keep a good solid part for the foot. Unfortunately, this stuff is just taking way too long to dry. You can see it's still pretty squishy yet, and this has been sitting for, I don't know, like 2.5 weeks now, I guess. So that wasn't going to work out. And you can see, like, even this one, I had peeled the cup away too early, and it started to, like, kind of slouch out the side there. So that was not going to work. So I came up with a different idea, and I think I described this before, but these holes are threaded here. Went to Home Depot to get some bolts. I did have one good foot left. You can see this here was the one good remaining foot. So I took that to Home Depot, sized it up. Home Depot only had 1/2 inch and 5/8. Now 5/8 was way too big, so this would almost fit in the 1/2 inch. I thought maybe, you know, the threads are messed up or something, so I got some 1/2 inch bolts. As you can see, just one size too small. So I ended up ordering some 9/16 bolts, and those screw in very nicely. So with the 9/16 bolts, I cut them to length because these holes are not threaded all the way down. So I cut them to length, and then I got some rubberized spray to spray on the heads to make them look like rubberized feet, and we ended up with something like this. It's a little bit lumpy on this side. This side is somewhat better, and these will just screw right in. Sure, screw right in. There we go. Something like that. That's not tightened, it'll get tighter than that. So I made 4 of those. I'm going to see if I can get, you know, one to fit in each hole in such a way that, you know, the nice side is facing out. We minimize this gap here and the lumpy parts, and that the machine is level. Like I said, I want to keep a nice side facing out, so the lumpy parts will be on the inside. Eliminate this gap and get the machine level, because not all these bolts are threaded up to the same height. You can't really see it here because the rubberized spray is up there, but some of them are threaded up a little bit higher than others. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to see if I can fit like one in each corner in such a way that they're all pretty level and look half decent. And I think that should solve our foot problem. So I'll do that. In the meantime, also, keys have been, or key tops, or other keycaps have been cleaned up. I had to touch up the paint on some of them. This one I'll have to clean up some more. You can see some of the paint, black paint smeared on the top there, so I'll have to clean that up. Other than that, those cleaned up pretty well, aside from still having to clean up some of my excess paint there, but it came out pretty decent. I just let them soak in water for a while. Some of them I let soak overnight, and the green stuff that was caked on there came out pretty easy. That all cleaned up. Same with the keys that go on the top. If you remember, these were all so dirty you couldn't even tell what they were, and now they're nice and clean, so those should be fine. The case has been prepared, cleaned that up, installed the plexiglass sides there since the glass is missing. So I'll have to clean that up a little bit, some dirt on those yet. The case cleaned up pretty decently. I did have to scrape some of the green stuff off of here. I don't know, it was some kind of like hardened rubber or something, it seemed like. You can see it just comes off in crumbs like that. There's some crumbs there. I have no idea what that came from, but I just had to scrape it off. Basically, it was really hard and just like chipped off. The paint was partially damaged in that operation, but it wasn't perfect to begin with. So I'm not sure if you can see like in the light how the paint's kind of like scratched here, and there seems to be either another layer of paint under the top coat or a layer of black primer. So I think it'll look okay if you don't inspect it like super closely. You know, this machine is probably at least 100 years old, so it doesn't have to look perfect, but in pretty much all of the machine there is some layer of black paint, either the shiny top coat. You can kind of see over here how it's still, if you can see that or not, how it's still pretty shiny, like around this corner, or if it's the more dull that we have here. The only place where it's really off is right here, which I'm guessing, you know, that's right where the handle would come up to about. So someone probably had their thumb there or something when they grabbed the handle. So a little bit worn off there, some worn off here, but overall not terrible. So I'm not going to worry about repainting that. I'm just going to leave it as is. It should look okay. Something else I wanted to point out. You can just barely see a little bit there left of the logo that would be there. That would say Wales Visible Adding Machine. And actually, if you hit it at the right angle, I can't really see if the camera's picking it up or not. There was a keystone symbol there. Not sure if the camera's going to pick that up. As you can kind of see it there, there's a very faint outline of a keystone symbol with whales in it. So I don't know whether someone painted over the logo or what exactly happened there. It is weird that like the outline of it is there, almost like they painted over it and left like the raised area. As you can see, the raised area visible through the paint. Not quite sure what happened, but anyway, not going to worry about that. I don't have any like logos or anything to duplicate it, so that's just the way it's going to be. And of course, the original glass piece, the one glass piece that I did have, we installed for the register cover. So I'll get the feet fitted, then hopefully we can flip this machine back over for the last time, and then install the keyboard and the case, and well, I have to change the ribbon too yet, so I found out that that ribbon actually is pretty much all dry. So to change that ribbon too, and then put the case on, and I think we'll be basically done with this. So the ribbon direction change mechanism finally makes sense now. It involves this piece on the bottom, and as you can see, when the ribbon is, oh, I should say, let's go over this piece first. So this piece is pivoted here and spring-loaded, and on the inside here it has a pin like that. So normally when the ribbon is wrapped tight like that, you can see that that pin is held tight against the middle there, and this piece, you know, only has hardly any movement because the ribbon's holding it tight. However, when the ribbon, when the wheel rotates and the ribbon reaches at the end, you can see that this springs out, and then this, when it springs out and rotates around, is what's going to hit this peg here, you can see, and change the ribbon direction. So when the wheel's on like this, you can see that that peg sticks out, and it can dink, hit that little lever and change the ribbon direction to wrap around the other way. And then as the ribbon wraps back around, if it's, or should be taut enough to pull that spring back in and retract that peg so it doesn't hit the lever again on the next time around. So that's kind of interesting. So I'll continue working on this. I just have to see how this comes apart here, and then we can change the ribbon, and I think that'll be just about it. You can see I've got the feet back on, and they actually look okay. You know, like over here when you're looking at the machine, you hardly even notice them because it has this skirt that comes out. So you kind of have to like bend down and look under to actually see the feet anyway. So I think it'll be okay. I measured the protrusion from the base plate of this, and they were all sticking up about the same, so it should be pretty level. The front, I think, is a little bit higher than the back. I leveled these 2 feet. They're about the same protrusion from the base of this casting, and the back to match, but they're a little bit shorter than the front, which is fine. And I don't think you're really going to notice that looking at it. There's hardly any difference. But either way, I think that should be fine. Definitely you're going to be able to pick the machine out now. You can see my hand readily fits under there, which is the main problem I was trying to rectify. You know, with this skirt right up against the table, it's kind of hard to pick the thing up, especially since it weighs over 50 pounds, but that should definitely solve that problem, and I think it'll look okay. So just gotta put the ribbon, replace the ribbon, put the cover back on, and I think we'll be just about done. So the wheels just unscrew like this, and then there's a hole with a slot that goes in, and the ribbon just has a pin riveted in the end there that goes in that slot. So I have to see if I can attach that to a new ribbon, which wouldn't have this riveted pouch, so I'll have to take a look at that. And you can see that they're clearly stamped R for right there, and also there you can kind of see it, because if you put the wrong one on the wrong side, I don't think it'll trip that pin, because the ribbon, as it rotates around, this has to push the pin that way. If you had this one on the other side, then when this came around to hit the pin, this would spring load back and retract and basically ratchet past the pin instead of flipping it to change the ribbon direction. So these are, definitely matters which side you put it on. So I was putting this back together, and I wanted to test it out a little bit, and you'll notice that we're not getting good, focus on that, we're not getting good printing in some of the columns. You can see like here, it's hardly printing, those are zeros, and this last column hardly prints at all. You can see a couple places where it printed a little bit in that last column, but overall that is not good. And if you take a look at what we had before, you can see that it's printing in pretty much every column except for these last two are slightly misaligned, but the other columns look pretty much fine. That one's slightly misaligned, but it's still printing there. You can still read what was printed there. So I took this back apart to see if I could figure out what the issue was and see if I can demonstrate this. So this last column that wasn't printing at all, if I take my screwdriver and I push the hammer forward here, if I can get all this on camera, push the hammer forward until it stops. So that's the stop, as far forward as I can push it. You'll notice that it doesn't even contact the page, no markers left there. So I was trying to figure out why these hammers now are no longer going far forward enough to contact the page, and it turns out, I'm not sure if you can see that or not, but there's an insane amount of play in the carriage. Like, I'd say that's moving at least 1/8 of an inch, that the paper is actually moving, distance from the hammers. So that could be part of the problem. And I held this forward and ran this machine through a cycle once, and you can see now we've got much better contact, pretty similar to what we had before. With these two next to each other, you can see we've got 3 good ones. That one's slightly misaligned, but it's still printed fine. One iffy one, then some good ones, and the last 2 are slightly misaligned, exactly as it was before. So that's going to be a problem. And the reason why that play wasn't there before is because the way they put the carriage back together, they kind of just shoved it together in a way that it wasn't movable, and I'm assuming that took up the play, which now that we put it back together correctly, the wear or the incorrect raising or something has revealed itself in the form of this play that we now have in the carriage rail. You can see that whole rail there is rocking. Get a not sure if you can really see in there or not, but you can see the whole rail there moving relative to the fixed piece of the rail right there. So I'm going to have to see what I can do about that. I don't really see any way that we can have the carriage slide and take this play out, unless you're talking about remaking those rails, which is not an option for me anyway. So the only thing that I can really think to do is to either put it back together the way they did, where they kind of just, shove the rollers in the wrong way, and then you can't move the carriage at all, or maybe I can put some shins in it somewhere. But either way, unless we remake those rails, I don't see a way that we can put this back together in a way that the carriage both slides and doesn't have that much play. So this is what I can do about that. It's definitely not expected. Alright, so actually not as bad as I thought. So you can see before we had something like this, and now we have something like this. While I was in there, I also checked this column here. Focus. The reason why this one is misaligned is because there's just a lot of play in the parts. So if I can show this here, it's really hard to see, but basically, I can't really see because my finger's in the way, but this column is very loose at the pivot point on the bottom, so it has a lot of play there relative to the other columns. And the only way to fix that would be to make a new piece at the bottom there where these have the rod that comes back diagonally has a hole in the end, and then a piece that's kind of like an L shape attaches to that, and that L shaped piece has a hole in the bottom with a pin that goes through it that attaches to the bottom of this. So you'd have to basically remake that L-shaped piece with a tighter hole to take up that play. Looks like that's where the play is. So that's just going to have to be that way. But definitely this is closer to what we had before, which was this. So I'm going to be satisfied with that. So what I did to fix this was, if you remember, each of the roller points for the carriage has 2 rollers in it, and the way that I had it initially was I had the rollers sit kind of diagonally where they roll against one flat here, and then the opposite flat on the top piece would roll against the other side of the roller. So basically the roller has they're like cylinders, so basically the corner of the cylinder where the sides of the cylinder meet the top is in the V, and then the side of the cylinder rolls against the side of the V. When I put this together the first time, I had both of the cylinders angled the same way. So basically, both of the cylinders in each point were rolling against the same side of the V. So what I did was I switched it so that one cylinder was rolling against the back side of the V, and then one cylinder was the opposite, rolling against the front side of the V, and that took up a good amount of play. You can see now there's a little bit, but there's nothing like it was before. So that's definitely much improved. The carriage still slides. There's still a little bit of a stiff point here and there where the brace joints are not perfectly finished and they didn't align it perfectly, but I'm going to be satisfied with that. It's printing as well as could be expected, really. Like I said, with the play in the first column there, it looks like the second column probably has some too. So, yeah, actually it wasn't that bad to fix at all. So I'll put the covers back on and hopefully we can do a final demonstration of this. Okay, so everything's all back together now. Unfortunately, my tripod doesn't go high enough for you to see the register of the printer, so I'll have to hold it up while I demonstrate this. 2 of the keys, this one and this one, when I was putting them back on, the numbers fell out. So rather than glue them back in, I just repainted those. So once that dries, I'll clean up the extra paint there, and hopefully that should be it. So we can do a demonstration here. So I'll hold this up so you can actually see the register. So we'll try 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 1, 3, 2, 1. And you can see 3, 3, 0, that is correct. See if we can total out. Nope, they're just set carries, so we have to pull that. Now we can total out. Total key latches down just fine. And it prints out the total. It is a weird feeling. I showed this before, how it has that extra spring that gets added in for totaling. You can definitely feel it when you pull the handle. It's kind of a weird feeling, but anyway, so that works. We can try adding like all 4s. You can see that prints pretty nicely actually all the way across now. Not sure if you can see that. I'll tear the paper off and hold up the camera at the end. Actually, we could have added something there. So let's do all 4s plus all 3s. And we have all 7s, as you can see. If I add 3 here, it should carry over to the next column. And it does. You can clear that out. If I add in all 9s, and I add a 1, should it carry all the way across? And it does. It carries all the way across. The machine's cleared out because there's no overflow digit. So a blank crank there. So we can try repeat. Let's do, say, 25 times 5. So we'll just pull the handle 5 times. And 125, that is correct. Oops, I went too far. I've got to clear. Do a blank crank. Total it out. And that works. So again, printing is not perfect, especially in the first 2 columns. But like I said, that's just down to a little bit of wear in the mechanism, unfortunately. We can try non-add, so let's enter something like 45. And if I latch this down and enter 5, it should do nothing. Actually, I guess I have to touch up that 5 key, must have missed that, so I'll touch that up too. So enter 5, we still have 45, so that worked, and you can see it printed, or at least tried to. Let's enter something bigger, let's enter a bunch of 5s. And see, those printed, did not add, we still have 45. So now if I want to add, say, 4, but do a non-print, you can see we now have 49, and it did not print, although it did advance the paper, which is interesting. If you do non-print, you'll just have blank spaces on the paper, but anyway, it seems to work. Those you just pull back to release. So yeah. Overall, pretty satisfied. The only real issue is the first 2 columns I don't want to print. Other than that, this is a pretty nice machine. Pretty well built. The keyboard has a nice latching sound to it. So yeah, I think that's about it for this one. Oh, let me hold this up. So you can see our first calculation there. The 1, 2, 3 everything adds up to 3330. And there's some more printing. You can get a feel there. There's our repeat addition, and that's about it. So, and one of my 3 keys has lost its thing too. Must get stuck to my finger or something. So I'll have to touch that one up too then. But anyway. So other things I wanted to mention. So a little bit of the background here. This company was founded as the Visible Adding Machine Company, I think in St. Louis, and then moved to Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania around 1905, where they started using the, I guess they still called it a visible adder, but I think they changed the name to the Wales Company. And the main marketing point of this machine, when it was released, was that it was a visible adder. Unlike the burrows, where the operator can't see the results that are being printed while they're sitting in front of it, this one you can, although you kind of have to look. There's a good distance between the front of this machine and the printing mechanism, so you have to look a good distance back to see it. But you can see it from the front of the machine, whereas you can't on the burrows. The thing that I find interesting, though, is the comptograph, which was actually released before the burrows, was also a visible adding machine. It was actually a lot smaller than this, too, and I believe a lot lighter as well. So nobody seems to really notice that machine, and it's not a very common machine. There's definitely more of these around than there are of comptographs, but the comptograph had a little bit of a weird operating sequence, whereas this one basically operates the same as the burrows does. So I don't know, I'm not sure why the comptograph was so overlooked at the time, given that the comptograph had the visible feature that this machine was designed to solve, even though it had already been solved by the comptograph. But anyway, I believe this was manufactured up until around 26 or 28 or so, and then the Wales company merged with R.C. Allen to form R.C. Allen Wales, and they manufactured a smaller version of this machine, which I believe they also started manufacturing the smaller version before the merger too. Not sure when exactly they started with that, but I believe that after the merger they no longer manufactured this larger machine, and they may have stopped even before the merger. But there you go. In 1905, which machine would you rather have on your desk?